I'm DK.
And I'm Toby from Fox Red Forge.
Today we're going to be discussing Session 0, where tangents are encouraged. So, speaking on Session 0, you want to start?
Honestly, I think you're better at the Session 0 discussion. You've definitely had a lot more groups and have had more Session 0s than I have. I think I've had a total of 2
Session 0s?
Yeah.
I think every campaign I've run, I've had a Session 0. Besides maybe the first 4 or 5 campaigns I ran, which, end up sputtering out.
Yeah.
Especially when you're new, the system was new at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But over time, I've definitely curated a list of things to go over for said Session 0. So scheduling is usually the biggest and hardest thing to do, getting everyone to sit down for what is a sit-down, a meeting that isn't a game.
Yeah.
It can be hard to convince people to come and sit through.
That's when you offer food.
Yeah.
And everyone comes.
This is true. So Session 0, just starting out in case you're unaware, Session 0 is getting your players together before the first session, quite obviously, where you're discussing the expectations, essentially, of the game, the players, and the dungeon master or the storyteller, exactly what the game is gonna entail, what you're gonna do in the game, and then kind of the vibe. So recently we had a Session 0. The first thing I like to do is send out a
pre-Session 0. You sent out.
Before the Session 0, so I know what to expect coming into the session of expectations, is a checklist. I forgot exactly what it was called.
I'm on it.
I'll let you get the name, but essentially it was a checklist of making sure the vibe was going to be right, what to include and not to include in the Session 0. So it's a document I sent out that could bring up some uncomfortable topics, such as slavery, racism, phobias of various kinds, whether related to just abstract things or gender or, phobias of that sort. It also asks kind of your violence levels, what you're willing to allow to happen at the table, sex, if you want sex in your game. Most people are okay with having sexual interactions, but most of the time fade to black. So usually you have a scale of acceptable at the table, fade to black, or not at all. A lot of people fall into the either fade to black or okay at the table. Some people like real world complications, instances and interactions in their game, but a lot of it, it's a campaign safety and consent checklist. So just checking in to make sure that we're all going to be on the same page about what we're going to have in the game prior to having it.
And it doesn't only ask those types of questions either. If I remember correctly, it even asks what type of gameplay you would like. Like if you're more into the intrigue side versus you are all about rolling dice and doing the math, that type of thing.
Yep, for sure. So yeah, checking in to make sure that roleplay versus all combat. I found that most of my players and interactions with people fall somewhere in between. I don't have a lot of. Yeah, I don't really have I guess more narrative almost.
Mm-hmm.
If I had to go on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being super combat and 5 being super roleplay, I would say most people fall in that 3.5 to 4 area. Yeah. A lot of people these days like the super narrative. So I send that out first, just to see where the vibe is, to even make sure that we're going to fit in the group. Because I like bringing up hard topics in my game. Sometimes it can help I think it might have been you
Yep.
that had said that it can help people kind of go through things. That happen in
Sometimes
real life.
it's nice to experience things through not yourself to help yourself out type thing.
Yeah. Experiencing things in a safe environment where
Mhm.
we can control what's going on in the situation.
Correct.
So once I sent that out, then we get a scheduled day where we all sit down together, and then we just talk about the campaign that we want to play together. So discussing what to bring to your sessions, what's going to be allowed at the table. This is up to food, drugs, alcohol, and then kind of like, so this recent campaign where we're switching to all paper versus having laptops or D&D Beyond at the table. So I was setting those kinds of expectations as far as what is allowed. Sorry. Speaking on player and storyteller expectations and behaviors, making sure that everyone's kind of on board with the same things
Mm-hmm.
as far as how close you pay attention to the game, power gaming in the meta of D&D. And like I said, most people are more into the narrative these days of the game.
And another important one is to determine early on if you have people that are going to sideline the campaign through like just being a murder hobo the entire time. Like, oh, I didn't get what I want. Well, I'm just going to kill them now.
Yeah, definitely want to weed out
Yeah.
murder hobos. If you don't want them, this is definitely the time to weed them out.
Like, there are campaigns designed for that, but
For sure.
most of the time, if you're going for people that like role playing, they would rather find a intriguing way to get around an encounter versus just murdering. But every once in a while, wizards got to fire off a fireball, so can't blame them all of the time.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, speaking on the commitment to the game, if it's going to be a 1-session thing, 4-session thing.
How long the sessions are?
Yeah. How long are you going to play for at a time? 1 hour? 4 hours? 8 hours? How often you do play, bi-weekly or weekly or whatever. I usually set aside a little bit of time to talk about myself. Not in an egotistical way, but more like, but I mean, what kind of style of DM I am, or storyteller. You definitely want to show, let the table know what you think your strengths are, or at least what you've been told your strengths or weaknesses are, as far as playing the game. So, like I said, it's really all about the expectations that people are going to be coming for.
And one of the expectations that should be set right away is if people are going to be trying to do like some sort of cool accent or whatever, not everyone can do that. It's not cool to, like, if someone's trying to do an Irish accent and it is just trash, don't, just sing, okay, well, now we're just going to make fun of them for that type thing. That's not very cool. Like, who knows, maybe down the line they'll get really good at it, but right now that's how they're going to play their character. It's probably going to change a little bit. I mean, like you were talking about Critical Role earlier. Do you remember Knott's voice from the start of the campaign? It changed a lot.
Yeah.
So, like, even professional voice actors, they don't know how their character's going to sound right at the start. So, let people, even if it's bad, try it. Because it adds to everything. Like, their character, your characters are going to pick up on things that they're doing a little bit more because their accent's a little weird or whatever. It adds to the whole dynamic.
Yeah, for sure. I think, speaking on voices, I don't know if we did it in our group, but it's definitely something we should have brought up is speaking in voices. In the character interviews, I definitely bring it up if you want to use an inflection, or do you have an inflection or a voice, in mind that you're going to be using. I don't think there's a wrong accent to use, even if you're doing a bad Boston accent or something like that. Then that's just the accent that the character has. I mean, Boston doesn't exist here, so
the stereotypical park the car down by the harbor. That was horrible.
but I mean, even still, I mean, I went to Boston, and the first thing I experienced was a Popeye's chicken. Dude, Popeyes? I was like, we're here. Yeah, so I mean, a lot of that, I like to get the behaviors of everyone, the expectations out of the way right away. One of the other important things is definitely bringing up the kind of game you're going to be playing, or the game that you are playing. So, are you running a module? What setting is it in? What's the tone? So the genre, you were kind of speaking on that before. In the checklist, it kind of mentions a little bit of the genre, but you definitely want to kind of nail that down.
Yeah. You want everyone's characters to, you can stand out a little bit, but fit into the world that you're in.
Right. I mean, I've had a session 0 before where the guy tried to use, one of the characters tried to use what was essentially a screen name. So when he was reading it out, it was more like a gamer tag.
Xbox dude 42069.
Yes. I was like, well, it's not really that kind of game. You're going to want to name your guy like he's a real person.
Yeah.
So getting things like that out of the way, is it okay to have, Bob Big Dick at the table, or is that too far?
Have you been paying attention to Jumper Bar?
Oh yeah. But I mean,
because apparently the answer is yes.
Well, yeah. Yes, but there's ways to make it more subtle than just calling yourself Bob Big Dick.
His name is Jumper Bar. Two trunks.
Yeah. Well, it speaks for itself.
It's there.
It speaks for itself. There was also going to be a Disney princess in that same campaign, so so that's kind of what you get. But yeah, I mean, this is the time you want to bring up things like, how do the character progression works? Do you get feats? What's the homebrew rules like? Death? Can player characters die, or do they respawn? Or is that just not even a question? I like to bring up the pillars of play, which is combat, exploration, and social, and kind of just go over how those all fit into the campaign. Kind of exactly. This is definitely where you want to try to get comfortable with everyone that you're going to be playing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, during the session 0, you could go straight into character creation.
Yep.
Which, sometimes you do, depending on the campaign. So, the campaign that I'm going to be running here in the future, may having everyone make their characters separately so that there's more interactions between the characters. But the previous campaign, or the campaign I'm running right now, I just had everyone sit down together, and we all just made characters together. Granted, we had some newer players, which is something definitely you want to talk about as well, is newer players, if there are any, and how to figure that out. How about introducing players if they're new?
Yeah. Something else, I don't know if you're going to get to it, but something else Session 0 should cover is player interaction, like what they can and can't do to each other. So, like, PvP, stealing, straight up killing each other's characters, or forcing them to, like, do certain actions, or keeping them from doing certain actions. Obviously, those, depending on the group and the campaign, can sway one way or another. Some people love PvP and are completely open to that. A lot of the time, that, in my opinion, can tear a group apart.
Yeah, for sure. Especially when one player wants to do something to the other person says, no, that's not possible, and then the DM has to make a call. Do you roll for that, or do you just let it happen, and all that? It's definitely good to get that out of the way right away. PvP is...
Like dueling's a thing, like that exists, but I don't know, a cohesive group. Uh, I don't know. I've met people that they hate each other and then they beat the hell out of each other and then they're best friends for the rest of their life. So like it is what it is.
Yeah, for sure.
But also like no go stuff, like cheating, um, interrupting other players. You already mentioned metagaming, that type of thing.
Yeah.
Um, Generally, I'm pretty sure everyone says no cheating, but some people don't realize the repercussions of like if they get caught lying about their roles or whatever. Like maybe you'll get a warning, maybe you'll just get kicked right there.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, definitely want to put those in place right away. That's kind of what the session is here for. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Definitely letting people know where the lines are drawn. And, yeah, it can be iffy. Are you playing with a group that's all strangers and you don't really know each other? Well, your session 0 might be weird, and after you might end up asking someone not to come,
Mm-hmm.
just because it's different.
That can be a whole video in itself too.
Oh yeah, for sure. Usually, I mean, if you know all the people, session 0s usually go over pretty smooth. It's really just about setting the boundaries, setting the expectations, and the type of game you're going to be playing.
Mm-hmm.
In my experience, most of the time I'm playing with people I relatively know, but sometimes I have one or two strangers to fill out the group because when I was first starting out, I didn't have, a lot of people around me that played Dungeons and Dragons, and I mean it's exploded in the last 5 years. No one can say that hasn't happened, but I started shortly after 5th edition was released, and I only had a couple of people, so adding more people to the group was iffy. And, you never know what you're going to get when you invite, random people to the group. I mean, honestly, you were random coming to my group,
Yep.
And I don't think either one of us knew.
It was actually kind of funny
how that.
It was funny how that happened. I walked into the game store. I'm like, "Hey, I'm kind of looking for a group to play D&D with. Know anyone?" And they're like, "Oh, just join the Discord. I'm sure there's a couple of groups going on." And I think he even said, "Message the guy on there named DK." I'm like, "Sounds good."
Yeah,
that's how that went.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, as far as like the session 0 and putting that kind of stuff together, you kind of got to go out there. If you don't have players. If you do have players, then it's pretty easy. You just ask your friends or whoever it is you play with. I want to have a session 0 so that we can get together and discuss what we can do for a game. If you don't know, enough people, then you're kind of pulling people, and that's really session 0 can be for friends that you already know, and it's helpful to put guidelines in place, but it's definitely necessary if you plan on playing more than a one shot with people you don't know.
Yep.
100%. Because, like I said, you have the checklist in the beginning, you send that out to people, you might get some weird responses. I've ran into people and we've just let them come into the game, and we definitely should have did a session 0 with them first. Because you can get some interactions that you aren't, that you aren't expecting.
Yeah. I don't got anything else.
No? Yeah, I mean, there's really not a lot to discuss on session 0. It's pretty straightforward. You're looking to set the expectations for the game, the campaign that you're going to play in. And if it's a long-term thing, the more kind of guidelines that you want to have in place, the shorter the campaign you plan on playing in, kind of the more loose you can go with it. I mean, if it's a one-shot, then you might have to deal with that one weird guy, that one weird guy.
I mean, obviously not if it's too messed up.
If they're crossing boundaries and crossing lines, they got to go right then. You got to stand up for not only yourself, but especially if you're the dungeon master. People look to the dungeon master as the arbiter usually of not only the rules of the game, but also the social expectations that you have at the table. And if there's someone crossing lines or making someone visibly uncomfortable, they got to go.
No.
immediately.
Mm-hmm.
But if the person maybe is just not fitting with the rest of your group, but you can tolerate them for the next 2 or 3 hours, then that's what you do for the one shot. But anything more than I think a one shot should require at least some kind of session zero. If not in person, then at least some kind of.
Sometimes a one shot could be a test for a potential session zero, kind of like what we're planning. I think almost everyone that was in that one shot is going to be in the next campaign, right?
Everyone in that one shot is going to be
plus one, right?
Plus two. Yep. We had 5 players in the one shot.
We have 7 now.
Players in the group. Yeah.
Okay.
Determining the amount of players you want to play with.
Yeah, that's a good one. I like to stick between 5 and 6, and I had a group of I think up to 9 at one point, and it was too much. Like I'm like, look, guys, I cannot handle this many players. People are getting bored. I'm not going to tell who to leave, but you guys can decide where the main group, and then let me know.
That can be rough.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of this I've kind of spoken on the dungeon master side of it, but there's got to be some expectations on the players to bring, their game, their head to this, their mindset, and their expectations as well. It's not just what the dungeon master is expecting all the players to do, but what does the player expect other players to do, or the dungeon master to bring to the game? Is the dungeon master prepping their sessions, or at least considering what's going on before, any of the game? Or is the whole thing just going to be off the cuff improv, every session?
If you don't at least do one session at some point in your dungeon master life where you show up with a sheet of paper of your prep and it just says something like "squirrel with dagger," then you're not.
You're not. Sorry.
Squirrel with dagger? Question mark.
Right. Will we get there? Yeah, but you don't want the players to come up with some expectations as well. So you definitely want the dungeon master to consider and plan out most of it, but each player should have their own expectations of what's going to happen.
Yep, and they should voice it.
100%. That's what the session zero is for. Everyone should be voicing their opinions on the game. If you're going over homebrew rules, I know when we did the homebrew rules, there's a couple of rules that we went over as a group and kind of panned out and see where they went. Someone had their own, own take on a feat, which coincidentally was the same take that I had on a feat, but to bring that into perspective, then, we were all on the same page about the situation.
I think my very first character in your campaign was a Spirit Walker Shaman. The homebrew class and subclass and everything. I think it was Loxodon?
Yep. You did bring Loxodon.
Yep, Loxodon. He wasn't actually a Loxodon. He was the, what's the one where they harbor a spirit for safety?
Oh, yes. The Kalstar.
Kalstar. Yep.
Kalstar.
Yep. But in the body of a Loxodon. So the Loxodon was basically the host. Yeah, that was a very interesting character. And then I started working 8 billion hours a day. So
yeah,
that was fun.
Yeah, sometimes it doesn't work out. The campaign kind of sputtered out after that, anyways. But that's something you want to discuss. Does what happens when players leave? That's something you want to discuss.
Mm-hmm.
Bringing in new players. At least in the session zero, you want everyone else to know the expectations of how that's going to go.
I actually have a question about one of my old characters.
Okay.
Hammond.
Okay.
In the future. I think we need to bring it back.
Okay. Maybe we'll talk about that off.
Yeah. But I just think it would be not for like a whole thing. Like maybe. Yeah, we'll talk about it.
Okay. Yeah. Anything else on Session Zero that you have?
Nope. I'm all good.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm good as well. So thanks for watching today. If you have anything that you want to add or any suggestions that you think that we should have mentioned here about Session Zero, you can leave a comment below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and have a great game.
A great day.